drove the car to the bank. And he said, I had no idea there was going to be a bank robbery. My friend came to me and said, would I drive him downtown? And he had to go to the bank. He wanted to make a withdrawal. Who knew that that meant bank robbery? So I drove him downtown. He came out running from the bank. I was surprised, but I didn't know there was a bank robbery. Okay. So there was a very fine FBI agent, and when the defendant was arrested, he said, can I call someone? The FBI agent said, sure. The FBI agent took down the number of the person he called. He called a friend to arrange for bail. The FBI agent found the friend, went out and interviewed him, and said, look, his defense is that he was just an innocent driver, that this fellow Smith came and asked him. To which the friend who, he called that night said, that's his defense? I mean, he told me that 3 weeks before that, he went to another bank with the guy, and the guy ran out of the bank, and he had money in a bag, and the bag blew up, and there was money all over the sidewalk, right? And he did it again, are you telling me? Right? Now, that may not be the best of friends, but that's a very good government witness. And basically, the notion is, the defense is, I'm just the innocent driver, to which the answer is, not a second time, right? If your friend says to you, drive me to the bank, I want to make a withdrawal, once you can do it. If you drive him a second time when he wants to say withdrawal, after he's ran out of the bank and the money's exploded on the sidewalk, you probably should say, I'm sorry, do it on your own, right? And so there, that prior robbery is being offered to show knowledge. It's being offered to show this wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mistake. He had knowledge. He knew exactly why he was being asked. There is a famous case, Malik in the Seventh Circuit. Malik gets convicted of smuggling heroin into this country in baseballs. He serves his time, he gets out, and he is arrested for smuggling heroin into this country in cricket balls, right? And his defense is, who knew, right? To which the answer is, you probably did, because this is exactly what you did before. And the Seventh Circuit opinion has this footnote that says something like, the government should keep a close eye on Malik in prison. He may be thinking of using basketballs. But you get the idea. His prior incident here really sheds light on knowledge. There is, I'm told, in Puerto Rico, an expression that says, the man who wins the lottery once is envied. The man who wins the lottery twice is investigated. Right? And people talk about this as the doctrine of chance. What's the chance this is going to happen twice? Right? Now, appreciate, the forbidden inference is propensity. This is his propensity. He's a bad person. Right? And people say that you can't have a propensity inference. Right? This is close. Right? It's like he smuggled in baseballs before, therefore he knew that what was inside the cricket balls. It's got a little bit of he did it before, therefore he did it this time. So it gets close to the forbidden inference here. Note that what it's being offered for is to show his mental state knowledge. It's not being offered to show that he did this specific act. It's not, for those of you who are criminal law aficionados, it's not offered for actus reus, it's offered for mens rea. Right? And there is this wonderful expression in the Bible, I think, that says, the devil himself knoweth not the mind of man. Right? It's hard to prove what's in someone's mind. And so we're a little more flexible here. We're a little more likely to have something that approaches the propensity inference when we're trying to figure out what's in somebody's mind. And there is no doubt that when you learn, right, that friend had been involved, had been a driver on a prior occasion, you say it is highly unlikely he didn't know what was going on this time. So it's not so much he's a bad person, he's at it again. It really is the specific facts here in the prior event really show, cast light on his mental state and put the lie to the claim of lack of knowledge. But we're getting close to the propensity inference. Right? Next one. Ready? Here we go. Identity. The perfect example of identity is a Woody Allen movie that you may have seen in which he robs the bank. He's not a particularly good bank robber, and his note says, that he hands to the teller, says, I have a gub, because he can't spell. And it's I have a gub, G-U-B, right, instead of gun. Now, assume that he gets away with the robbery. And he goes into the next bank 3 days later, and he hands the note to the teller, and he says, I have a gub. And he's arrested. And you say to yourself, can I use that to prove that he was the gub robber in the first robbery? Right? And the law says that's not a signature crime. It's so unique, right, that it's as if he came into the bank. I don't know, this is going to be before your time, but how many of you saw the movie Zorro? Right? Zorro made a Z whenever he committed some act. Right? This is his signature. It's like he walked out of the bank and he put a Z on the wall, so we all knew this was a Zorro bank robbery. And as these issues, as something gets so similar that it is a signature crime, we allow you to use another act in order to say the person who did that one almost certainly did this one because they are identical in the way they were done. It's not propensity. It's not he's a bad person. It's really this is his signature. This is the way he does this. Again, it approaches propensity, but not quite. Right? What's another example of something that approaches propensity? There was a famous actress who I can't remember her name, you may, who seemed to have a problem with shoplifting and was arrested repeatedly. And so now assume she is arrested out front of the store, and she's got the clothes in her bag, and she says, total accident, right? I mean, God, I put them in the bag. I meant to pay for them when I got to the front. I just forgot. Mea culpa. I'm sorry. Let me go back in and pay. And she's arrested. And the question was this an accident? And the fact that she has 4 prior convictions for shoplifting suggests it's not an accident. Now, if you look in your 404B list, one of the crimes is lack of accident or mistake. Right? That gets close to propensity. That is, she shoplifted before. Let me tell you, she's shoplifting now. Right? But courts will allow that as well because it's not quite she's a bad person, she's at it again, although it gets close. Right? Another example, common plan or scheme. And that, I think, is listed in the rule 404B, such as plan, right? So you have in your material a case called Jones. And you will remember that Jones seems to go into garages, rub up against men, and steal their wallets, right? And she does it garage after garage, man after man. And they allow you to offer as evidence, or the prosecution is allowed to offer as evidence, the other crimes that she may not be charged with. Why might she not be charged with them? We'll take a simple example. 4 of them take place in Brooklyn, 1 takes place in Manhattan, right? And you may not have venue. If you try them all, you can't try them all in Manhattan. If 2 takes place in Queens, you can try the Queens one in Queens, the Manhattan one in Manhattan, the Brooklyn one in Brooklyn. You can only try crimes in our state system in the county where they occurred. So I may be trying 1 case in Manhattan. If I try that 1 case, the answer is she's getting acquitted, right? Because all the person can say is, look, she came in, she rubbed up against me, And 10 minutes later, I checked and I didn't have my wallet. To which the jury says, not guilty. I mean, you're just not going to win that case. 5 people come in and say she came in, she rubbed up against me, and 5 minutes later I didn't have my wallet. You're going to win that case. And so we're allowing that because the underlying act is ambiguous. Right? You can't quite tell what happens, and trying several of them together, right, allows us to have a better sense of what her plan is. Now you have to be totally careful here, because this too approaches propensity, the forbidden inference. This too approaches, she's a bank robber, and therefore she robbed this bank. Right? She's a bad person. She just got out of jail for rape. Therefore, she must have committed this rape. So you really want this to be a situation where it's not, I mean, think of, it's a bank robber. He's a bank robber, therefore he committed this bank robbery. Right? That is really, he's at it again. Right? That is, if you're a movie fan, a Humphrey Bogart fan, it's the last scene where he says, round up the usual suspects in Casablanca. Right? There's no ambiguity. There was a bank robbery. Right? So I'm only proving that his prior bank robbery to say he's a bank robber. That's his character. That's what he does. In this one, there's really ambiguity. I'm not even sure there's a crime. Right? I'm not sure what happened. Right? Maybe he lost the wallet. But when I put 5 of these together, I see the pattern. I see the plan. And the most famous case here is a British case called The Brides in the Bath. And The Brides in the Bath goes something like this. The defendant is George Joseph Smith. There's a wonderful book called Great British Trials. And George W. Smith, we're told, marries Bessie Monday, age 33. And she is the daughter of a wealthy deceased spinster. They marry in 1911. Shortly thereafter, the bride changes her will to make Smith the beneficiary. She purchases life insurance, making him the beneficiary, and she dies in the bathtub, right, 6 months later, and it is ruled an accidental drowning. And he writes to her father and says how sad he is about all of this. And soon thereafter, he marries Alice Burnham, age 25. She is described as stout but healthy. People say, really, that means stout but wealthy. He marries her. She changes her will to make him the beneficiary. She purchases life insurance, making him the beneficiary. She dies in the bathtub. The coroner rules accidental drowning. 1914, she marries Margaret Elizabeth Lofty, a spinster, age 38, daughter of the late Reverend Lofty, a man of some means. They are married. She changes her will. He's the beneficiary. She purchases life insurance. There's a wonderful piece of trial testimony where they go on their honeymoon. They go to a bed and breakfast. He says, do you have a bath here? She says, no. He says, well, we'll look for another place. They go to another place. Do you have a bathtub here? Yes. Can we see it? That seems big enough. She dies in the bathtub, right? Now, try any one of those by himself, he gets acquitted, right? Even the first 2, the coroner said accidental drowning. After the 3rd, you say to yourself, whatever else is true, I'm not marrying this fella, right? So, again, it is a common plan and scheme. It has so many similarities, and there's real ambiguity without it. You just don't know what happened. It's not like there was a bank robbery, who did it. It's like, what happened here, okay? And the law allows, in those circumstances, one to prove it. Okay, now, real quick, we're going to try some problems, and we'll stop at 9 sharp. But the only way, it's very hard for students, I find, to say what's propensity, what's permissible. The only way to do it is to do some problems. What happens over time is you just get a feel for this, and your sense of, I don't think a judge is going to let that in. That really sounds in propensity. Remember, even if you have a permissible purpose, a good judge should say to herself, okay, there may be a permissible purpose here, but still the jury's just going to think he's a bad person, he's at it again, and so I'm not going to let it in. So 404B says may means 403. The permissible inference here is the permissible purpose. The impermissible inference, the unfair prejudice, is he's a bad person, right? So here we go. Number 5 on page 166. Ready? D was one of 3 men who was standing against the wall. When a police officer approached, according to the officer, D threw a paper bag into the bushes on seeing the officer. The officer recovered the bag, which contains 50 vials of cocaine. Okay? 3 men against the wall. The bag is thrown, and the defendant is arrested. At trial for possession of drugs, Dees claimed that one of the other 2 men had tossed the bag. Okay? Look, I was there. Somebody tossed the bag. It wasn't me. May the prosecution, in rebuttal, offer evidence of Dees' prior conviction 1 year earlier for selling cocaine? Microphone on.
It would be inadmissible because of Rule 404B?
I think so, too. I think the inference there is propensity. He's a drug dealer, therefore he's the guy who threw it. Right? I think that is the principal sort of inference that a jury is going to draw. That's an impermissible inference. It's a First Department case. The First Department said inadmissible. It's not really intent. It's not knowledge, right? It's not absence of mistake. It's not common plan and scheme. It's not identity, right? It's just he's a bad person. Of all the 3 of them, he's the likely guy who did it because he's a drug dealer. And that's the impermissible inference. Okay, number 1. D, old Fifth Circuit case. D, a letter carrier, is charged with stealing 2 packages from the mail. His defense is that he took the packages inadvertently and intended to return them to his supervisor at the end of his shift. In rebuttal, the prosecution offers evidence that at the time of his arrest, D had 2 unsigned credit cards in his wallet, issued in the name of people on D's mail route, and mailed 6 months prior to his arrest. D objects to the evidence. What ruling? Is there a permissible purpose here? Yep.
Lack of accident.
Lack of accident, intent, right? Something like that. Fifth Circuit let it in. And I think that's probably the right ruling here. We have to prove intent. The devil himself knoweth not the mind of man. So we're going to be a little more lenient with 404B evidence because it's a mental state issue. And I think this argument here is it's less an accident if he's got this in his wallet from 6 months before. Okay, number 2. Ready? Here we go. D is charged with the prosecution of with the possession of 1 pound of heroin, which was found hidden under the fender of his automobile in the course of a border search. D testifies that he had no knowledge that the heroin was concealed in the vehicle. In rebuttal, the prosecution offers evidence that D was convicted 3 years earlier for attempting to smuggle 15 kilograms of marijuana across the border in a backpack. Is the rebuttal evidence admissible? What?
I don't think so, but
I don't think so either. Right? I think this sounds more than anything else in he's a bad person, he's at it again. Right? Now, look, if you ask me what I think happened here, which is, I think as a young kid, he was smuggling marijuana. He's grown up. Now he's smuggling heroin. Right? He no longer needs his backpack. Now he's using his car. Right? That's what I think probably happened. Right? But that's a forbidden inference. Right? And that is he's a bad person. He's at it again. That is propensity. Okay. Now, you can see those of you who are, from Europe, and my guess is from Asia, you say to yourself, we're really keeping that evidence out, right? And the jury's going to learn that in France to be sure, right? And the judge is going to consider it. Here the notion is we're going to try you for this crime and not for other crimes unless we have some inference other than a propensity inference. Number 11. D was indicted for the armed robbery of a San Francisco bank. You may know the Patty Hearst case. The wonderful thing about teaching is when I first wrote this problem, Patty Hearst was being tried. Everybody knew the Patty Hearst case. Then there was a decade that no one knew the Patty Hearst case. Then there was a movie about Patty Hearst, and everybody knew the Patty Hearst case. Now we're back to nobody knows the Patty Hearst case, which is perfectly fine, but this is basically a Ninth Circuit case, United States versus Patty Hearst. Dee was indicted for the armed robbery of a San Francisco bank. At trial, her defense was duress, that she was forced to participate in the bank robbery against her will by her co-participants, including A and B. So that's her defense. They forced me to commit this bank robbery. To rebut that defense, the government offered evidence that 1 month after the bank robbery, Dee assisted A and B rob a sporting goods store. As to that incident, the proof showed that A and B entered the store and remained outside in a truck, that a store clerk saw A shoplifting and attempt to arrest him, and that Dee then discharged an automatic rifle into the store, enabling A and B to escape. Is the evidence of the sporting goods store incident admissible? So her defense is duress, and the government now wants to prove up this act that happened a month later. Yep.
It's admissible
Because?
because she has done the same thing twice. I mean, as we said, once, not twice.
Yes, and also I think part of it is really suggests that she wasn't under duress, right? I mean, here she is to the extent, I mean, look, things can happen in a month. Maybe you can tell a story that explains this. But, you know, these are your captors, supposedly, and you're helping them escape, right? So it's not listed there, but this is sort of rebuts the duress defense, right? And the answer is, the Ninth Circuit said, admissible. Now, just appreciate the following. Some people, when they talk about 404B evidence, partly because they're thinking of cases like the Gubb, right, or our bank robbery case of the driver, talk about 404B evidence as prior similar act evidence. Right? Nothing in 404B requires prior, and nothing in 404B requires similar. Right? This case is subsequent, and it's dissimilar. Right? But it sheds light on the defense duress or the lack or the duress defense or the lack thereof. Also, how you're going to prove up this incident at the sporting goods store? You're going to call the people who were in the sporting goods store at the time. This is not reputation or opinion, right? This is proving an act. This is a trial within a trial. And so if you're defending Patty Hearst, you got to defend her on the bank robbery, and you got to worry about what happened at the store, right? So you got to be prepared in a certain sense for two trials, because that's what's going on here. Look with me, if you will, at go back to page 165, and at the very bottom, Professor Uviller taught evidence at this school for years and was a very distinguished scholar. But he wrote that he would have a rule, he would change the rule to say specific instances of prior conduct, but only by repeated, habitual, or unusual incidents in similar circumstances are admissible. And he's wrong, right? That's not what the rule should be, because it doesn't need to be prior, it doesn't need to be similar, it just needs to be non-propensity, and it has to be shedding light on something other than he's just a bad person, and that inference has to outweigh the propensity inference. Right? Okay, let's do a couple more, and then we'll stop. Number 3. Ready? 3 and 4, and then we'll call it a night. Dee is on trial for a bank robbery that occurred in Manhattan. Modus operandi: handing the teller a note with a death threat on it and the words money or death. The choice is yours, accompanied by pictures of a dead body under the word dead and a live smiling person under the word money. At trial, no witness can positively identify the defendant as the robber, but his fingerprint is on the demand note. Okay? That's a tough case to try, right? I mean, if you're the prosecutor. His fingerprint's on the demand note, but so what? I mean, you can get on there in a variety of ways. I can't really have an identification. I'm not going to win that trial if I'm the prosecutor. I do not have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Right? That'd be my bet. It's a Manhattan bank robbery. The prosecution, which is called W, the teller at a Brooklyn bank, which was robbed shortly before the Manhattan bank. right? Why isn't he indicted for the Brooklyn Bank? You can charge him in Manhattan with a Brooklyn crime, right? So it's an unindicted offense. In that robbery, the perpetrator handed W an identical note. W identified D as the person who robbed her. Is W's testimony admissible? Yep?
Yes, because of his identity.
It's identity, right? The only issue in this case is who's the bank robber, and this is a signature crime. This is such an unusual note, right? Such an unusual modus operandi. And once you get in this evidence, if you get in this Brooklyn Bank robbery, you convict him of the Manhattan Bank robbery, right? You're going to get a conviction. The whole case will turn out to be, is that 404B evidence coming in. Last one, number 4. Quickly, D is accused of burglary of O's home. The burglar made off with some sterling silver. At trial, the prosecution offers the testimony of a pawn shop owner that D tried to pawn the silver stolen from O's house, and a handwriting expert that the writing on the pawn ticket is probably D's. The prosecution also offers testimony. Okay, so we're going to stop there. That's a tough trial, right? I'm charging with burglary. Maybe really what I can prove is that he was in possession of the goods subsequent to the burglary. I'm going to have a lot of trouble proving he's the burglar. Okay? The prosecution also offers testimony of W, that D is the person who attempted to burglarize W's home 3 days after the burglary of O's home. W will testify that he lives on the same block as O, and that he surprised D in the dining room in the course of the burglary. In each burglary, the perpetrator jimmied open the back door of the house in the early morning testimony. Is W's testimony admissible? So what I want to prove up is an uncharged burglary happens in the same block, and the burglar tried to jimmy open the back door in both burglaries. Will I be able to get in the other crime, the uncharged crime?
I don't think so. I think
Because?
it would be, there is, the evidence wouldn't prove, I mean, there is no identity here, or there is no...
I mean, the issue is identity. Who did it? But keep going. You're doing fine.
There wouldn't be this is not the same modus operandi. I mean...
I agree with you completely, right? Which is to say, look, I mean, it's a close call in some ways, but jimmying opening the back door of a house, that's how you commit a burglary, right? Yes, it's the same block, but there's really nothing special about this that says this is the mark of Zorro. This is exactly the way he does it. It's got too much. He's a burglar, right? Therefore, he burglarized this house. It's got too much propensity and not enough real similarity. So, again, what I said was it's wrong to treat Rule 404B as it requires prior similar acts. But when it comes to proving identity, right, he's the man, right? You really need a signature, because that's when we're most worried when we're proving identity, that they're simply going to say he's a burglar, he's at it again. And that is the forbidden inference. So my sense is 3 is admitted, right? 4 isn't. We'll do a few more, but you get the sense of how this works. This is the hottest topic in evidence at the moment. Some of the circuits have been far too lenient in letting the government prove things. The 7th and the 3rd Circuit have major opinions in this area. The advisory committee is thinking about revising the rule. There's a new article coming out in the esteemed Columbia Law Review about all of this, and we'll talk more next time. Again, I thought everybody was well prepared and very good tonight.